queers who forget about struggling to adult, we're struggling to human.
At least that's what everyone's telling us.
You're right.
Per usual. Hey, I'm Angela, bringing sense to the conversation. From here on my soapbox, I shed light on the things society doesn't want you to talk about. You know, the real shit that matters: intersectional thinking, sexuality, queerness, neurodiversity, consent, and the fact that self-care is bullshit. For me, it's all about community and how we can care for each other.
And I'm Molly, giving a big fork you to cookie cutter solutions. I help burnt out, busy as fuck, neurodivergent, and queer entrepreneurs make shit happen by providing out of the box solutions and sustainable systems to grow your biz. For me, it's all about doing what makes sense for your brain.
Enough with the chit chat. Let's get to it.
Keep listening, and together we'll explore the drudgery, dreams, and all that shit in between. Get ready to call bullshit on what everyone's saying you should be doing,
as we navigate the spectrum between what really matters to you and the shit keeping you from it.
Hey, everybody!
Hi!
Angela and I are always behind the scenes, like, dancing it out to the intro.
Yeah.
It's like a little mini workout before we get started. Oh, yes. So today is a very important day because we've decided that it's damn near time that we start telling our stories, and we're going to kick it off with Angela's story of them. Her. So Angela, I think we've talked about this a little bit in like sneaky peeks throughout the course of the podcast. But if I remember correctly, you were like 8 or something when you realized what you wanted to do with your life.
Yeah, I mean, pretty early on, right? Like, early on, I recognized, at 15, I knew for sure what I wanted to do. Did I do that? No, I did not. Thank you, society. I did not. But at 15, I 100% knew what my dream was.
Yes. And and you eventually got to that, but there's a whole story that we have to get into, like, to go into that. I always just find that to be like a really interesting fact, because some people are like, yeah, when I was 5, I wanted to be a doctor. I'm a plumber. Like, you know.
Yeah.
And you actually eventually made that. Oh, wow, that hurt. Make your dreams a reality. But like, so.
But I did have interest in this. At the age of 8, I did have interest in human relationships, communication, sexuality. I was asking a lot of questions. I wanted to know everything. And I never once, not one single time in my life, thought it was weird or gross.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we shouldn't think those things are weird or gross, but, you know.
Right, but the society we grow up in, right? The society we grow up in says, we don't talk about sex.
We don't talk about Bruno.
Right, exactly. Like, we don't talk about it. And, growing up in the family that I grew up in with the conservative values, it's, surprising that I never had some of those feelings, but I just didn't. It didn't make sense to me.
All right. Well, I feel like I need to stop trying to guide your conversation here and let you go. So tell us, like, I guess my first, I'm gonna guide this.
Go ahead, guide it.
Number 1.
You know I do better when I have questions, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Okay, so I know that you were diagnosed later in life, but did you as a kid ever think, geez, I'm weird?
Did I think that? No.
Yeah.
Did everybody tell me that? Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't. I think one of the moments, this was in high school, one of the moments, and for some reason this has really been in my mind lately, a defining moment for me was I always knew that when I talked, everybody got really quiet.
Oh.
And not in my family. When I talked to my family and I talked about the stuff I was interested in, I was always like, it was just weird. It was out of the box stuff for them. It didn't make sense for them, and my nickname was Motor Mouth. They called me Eminem. Because I would get talking about something and I wouldn't stop, right? And it
Yeah.
was usually something that none of them really cared about. Um, and which is fine. They don't have to care about the same things that I do. But, wanting to have in-depth conversations about Alice's Adventures in Wonderland when you're 5, like,
Because you read it.
I did. Yes, I did.
Yes.
Yes.
Just to make it clear, Angela could
Um,
read at a very young age.
yes, I could. So yeah, I mean, people thought I was weird. People thought, I was often called, like, oh, well, you're just a smarty pants, and you're a smart ass, and um you think that you're better than, why are you talking like that? So there were those kinds of things. But back to this, like, pivotal moment.
Mhm.
I have this friend she's just beautiful, like, unbelievably beautiful inside and out. She has this beautiful hair, this beautiful face, beautiful teeth, beautiful body, and beautiful, like, personhood.
Thought you were
She's
gonna
just
say boobs.
Oh yes, she has very nice boobs. She has very nice boobs. Um, and like, the perfect hourglass figure, and beautiful, like, Jessica Rabbit type, you
Ah.
know,
Mm.
that kind of beauty. Um, naturally.
Yeah.
But also this really beautiful, like, spirit and kindness, um, that she's always had. And she we were I don't know where we were, but she came walking in, and I said, that must be nice that when you walk into a room, all of the heads turn. All eyes are on you. Um, Now, you know me, I like to be up on a stage and having everybody listen, right?
Yes, you do. Mhm.
Her comment to me, though, was, it must be nice that every time you open your mouth, the room goes silent and everybody listens.
Oh.
Oh, but both of us had the same experience of, it's not actually that nice.
Right.
Like, for her, being the beautiful, buxom person who she is, was not nice. The attention was not always nice. And for me, it's the same. Like, I want that attention. I like that attention. But at the same time, a lot of times, like, conversation just got shut down. Not necessarily by other people, but people were so, like, trying to figure out what I'm saying and how they could possibly respond. So that's kind of been my experience from a very young age. And the pieces that go with that of, like I said, being called a snot or a know-it-all or arrogant. I know I still, to this day, very much come off as arrogant. Um, and I'm not. Like, I don't believe that I'm better than anybody else. I believe that there are things that I'm better at. I believe that I may have evidence against what you're saying, but I still want to hear what you're saying, and I'm open to being wrong if you can provide evidence that guides me in another direction. So I don't think that I'm actually arrogant,
Right. Yes.
but I
Okay.
know that my demeanor is.
Right.
Self-care is bullshit. That sounds very arrogant. But let's have that conversation, right?
Right? Yeah. No. I mean, there's a difference between saying something that's going to obviously get people's attention and have a conversation. Well, I mean, you do feel like self-care is bullshit, but in the
I do, but
convention,
it doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from, let's have a conversation about this.
right. It's like your definition and my definition are two different things and blah blah blah. Like there's a whole thing. Um okay. So when Oh, okay. We'll go down a queer side quest for a minute. Um,
Yay!
yay! Uh, I'm like thinking back to my own childhood. How young were you when you had your first crush on a girl or a person that is not a cisgendered male?
Um, I would say maybe 6 or 7.
I feel like we all did it at like that age. Like we're like, ooh. I mean, me, it
Right.
was
I
a
mean,
princess, but like,
here the thing is that I was interested in everybody.
right.
Right? So I don't know at that age if it was like a crush or just like, ooh, that's a really interesting person and I want to watch them and see what they do. Now, here's the thing. I felt closer to the weirdos
Right.
always. Basically, if they wore glasses, I was more likely to get a crush on them. So there was that, but then there was also the I'm glad you find that funny. But there was also the like I want to take care of you. My mom says that I've always been a very, very nurturing person. So
Mhm.
there was that. Like I see that somebody's not being kind to you and I want to make sure that I am kind to you.
Mhm.
So I would say that I had more of the connection feeling, but it didn't matter to me whether they were boys or girls. Like I
Right.
didn't notice, I guess.
Yeah. I get that. Mhm.
But I know that I was told and called young lady all of the time, and I still hate that young lady. Ugh. Um, I really don't like that.
Yeah.
Um, but I fought against that, I guess. I didn't like it. I specifically remember at 4 or 5, um, coming out of my room and I just had a pair of like jean shorts on and no shirt. And my brothers were there for the weekend and they're like, "Dad, tell Angela to put her shirt on." And my dad was like, "Young lady,
Oh no.
put your shirt on." And I'm like, "But you don't have your shirt on."
Right.
Right? Like I did not understand. It wasn't very many years after that that I have had the body that I have now
Mhm.
since before I was 10. And so I would wrap my breasts.
Mhm.
I did not want them. Right? Like a
Okay.
lot of people think genitals, but I didn't care about that. I just didn't want these things.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
Right? Like no 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 no. No no no. Wait, go back. Go back.
Go back in.
Go away. I don't want you. Um so I mean I had that young. As soon as that started, I was not happy.
Mm.
I'm fine now. I love my breasts today. Um, I could care less, either way. I like breasts. I like not breasts. Whatever. Um, but that's what I remember most from that time, and especially before I really understood the gender differences.
Mhm.
Like, why? That's dumb. Why do I have to wear a shirt? Like, I look
Right.
just like you. You know, like I it didn't make sense. And maybe that was neurodiversity. Well, there's no maybe about it. I'm sure that that was neurodiversity because the other people around me were not having that same experience of trying to
Right.
understand why and trying to argue about it. It was just because that's how things are. That's the response that I would get. Even from my cousins who were just a couple years older than me. Well, that's how things are. You're a girl. I'd be like, but why are things like that? Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Um, okay. So let's keep going down this path. Um, so at 15, I'm slightly changing subjects. At 15, you were like sexology, something to
I'm
do
going to
with
be a
this.
sex therapist. I was like,
Yes.
I am going to be a sex therapist.
Yes.
This is what I'm going to do. And I had a car and I spent time at the library and I researched all the things and I started researching about BDSM and trying to understand that and trying to understand the different feelings in the body and why I would get really frustrated when somebody would, brush against me or like what you're doing right now, like,
Oh no, I
um,
am pressing extremely
oh,
hard. Don't get me wrong. I cannot do butterfly touches. No.
right, like,
No, I'm like
no, don't do that.
scraping.
Um, um, and then like, why did it relax me so much to play that game where your friend would like sit on your legs and draw on your back? And you had to guess what they're drawing. Like I loved that game.
I've
Um,
never heard of this game. Did I miss a
um,
piece of my childhood? What happened?
I don't know. I don't know if everybody did that or not, but I did. Um, why were people so frustrated and angsty about my relationship with my cousin,
Oh,
who was the person who I felt the most comfortable around, the most safe around, and like when they hugged me, it felt so much better than when anybody else hugged me, and that kind of stuff, and why people thought there was something wrong with that, and then why people were attributing that to being sexual when there was absolutely no sexual anything. So, that made me really think, and I already had this interest in communication and psychology and sex. And so that like took it that next step of wanting to understand myself, but also wanting to understand everybody else. Um, Trying to figure out how I fit.
yeah.
Am I weird, right? Am I weird or am I normal? By the way, the answer is yes, you're normal. Um,
We have lots of air quotes this episode.
yeah, we do. Um, uh, so yeah, that was that, and I knew that's what I wanted to do, even though I didn't do it because that wasn't the ladylike and appropriate thing to do, and whatever. So I just didn't go to school at all.
Fuck it. If you're not going to let me do what I want, I won't do anything.
Instead, I took it upon myself of, okay, so this is what it means. This is what life is supposed to be. I'm going to try it your way. And instead of going to college, even though I had a full ride scholarship offered to me, I bought a house, moved in with a guy, and had a very tumultuous, not healthy relationship.
Hmm. But obviously, that's what society wanted you to do. So that's what you did.
I mean, let's
Right.
face it, that's normal.
Right. We don't think that's actually normal. Like, it's not healthy. FYI. Like,
Right, but
it's not.
that is what is looked upon as being okay.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that happens more often than people being who they are and pursuing their dreams and doing it their way and the way that their brain works.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I did that. Still didn't have a diagnosis of any kind.
Did
When
in
I did
all
turn, go ahead.
in all of your research, did it ever like have a light bulb of like that feels a little bit like me? Like did anything, because you were studying psychological concepts, any of that, did it ever be like, that is not how you say that. Was it ever one of those moments of like, this feels familiar?
So yes, and that's actually what happened.
Okay.
So I was studying a lot and I was learning about this thing called ADHD.
Hmm.
And by this time, my cousin had been diagnosed with multiple things. ADHD being the one when they started treating the ADHD, all of the other diagnoses kind of fell away.
Mm.
Not all of them, but like the anxiety was still there. Like a
Oh,
lot of
oh, yeah.
anxiety
Mhm.
still there, right? But that's when they realized, okay, we were not correct. Like this is not like schizophrenia. This is ADHD. And I think if he were still alive today, he would definitely have an autism diagnosis. I think there's absolutely no doubt about that. But he and I talked a lot about ADHD. And what I was learning was it was a bunch of white boys,
Mm.
and all of the research was white boys.
Yes.
And I was like, where are all of the other people? Is this really something that is just a white boy thing, right?
Mm.
And mind you, at this time, I had been doing, my fair share of alcohol and recreational drugs and all of this. And I also had my own insurance. So I could go to the doctor and start having some conversations. And I was getting diagnosed with clinical depression and generalized anxiety and
Tons of symptoms, but not a root cause.
right, and borderline personality. Um, and being put on medication. And I was like, no, 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 this isn't right. This isn't right. This isn't right. So finally, I went to a psychologist who was recommended to me as being somebody who was kind of a progressive thinker, very, very knowledgeable, um, and who would not therapize me because I
Uh,
don't like being therapized. Um, but somebody who would legitimately have a conversation with me, an intellectual conversation with me. That was really
okay.
important. So I went to this person, and in our first session, he's asking me questions about drug use. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, yeah, I like them all. I don't do needles, but I like them all except speed. So any of those, the speed, the meth, like I use that to help me go to sleep. And I don't use it when I go to parties because then I just fall asleep while everybody else is having a good time. So I like that one, but only in certain circumstances. And here are the circumstances. And he's like, oh, for fuck's sake, you have ADHD. Let's get you a prescription. And he wrote the notes and everything to my doctor to get me prescription. And my first prescription for my ADHD diagnosis was Ritalin.
Mm.
Which worked better for me than any of the others. I don't take medication specifically for that now, after spending a lot of years doing some behavior work on myself and identifying the things that help me without taking medication.
Mhm.
I do, though, take Wellbutrin, um, which can be used for ADHD. And I also, but it's a non stimulant, which I appreciate. And then I also use Intuitive, which is for sensory processing.
That's guanfacine, right?
Guanfacine,
Mhm.
yes. So I also take that, which has been added in the last couple of years. So I do take medication and I also do behavior work on myself, specifically sensory environment stuff, which at 22, when I got my ADHD diagnosis, I was not aware of all of the sensory stuff. Like I had the sex stuff over here that I was understanding, and then I
Mhm.
had the ADHD stuff over here that I was understanding, but I had yet to merge those together for me.
Right.
I hadn't merged them together for me. However,
For other people.
I did get a teaching degree where, very specifically, when I went into my teaching degree, I wanted to do something with ESOL and linguistics because the understanding that I had of how people understood language was very similar to my own way of understanding and processing English. So I was like, okay, I can help here. Not to mention, I really kind of had this obsession with the Mexican culture and like the everything about it. I loved the stories and I loved the artwork, and so I kind of had that, which led me in the 90s to want to be part of this community. And how could I do that? By providing a skill that I had to support. So I did that, but I also leaned heavily into the working with students with exceptionalities.
Mm.
So whether that be
Wonder
gifted,
why.
yeah, whether that be working with students who were identified as gifted or with students who had reading challenges or behavior. I really like working with behavior um, because I didn't think that it was done well.
Right.
I didn't like how it was handled when I was in school. I didn't want people to have the same experiences that I did in school. So I did put that together, right? Like the sensory stuff, like how can I create my classroom so that the behaviors don't even show up there because the nervous system is regulated in my
Right.
space. Um, but I still didn't do that for myself. I
We
did
are
not put two and two together.
right, but we're our own worst. Like whether you're a teacher or a business owner, whatever expertise you have, you are always your own worst patient, client,
Yeah,
whatever, child. Uh, when you're parenting yourself. Um,
yeah.
so I mean that makes absolute sense that you would have.
And I may have had great understanding of ADHD and a lot of behaviors. I had a piss poor understanding about autism. And I had the biases that went along with what does it mean to be autistic?
Right.
Being that if you're autistic, you have these massive issues with communication, right?
Right.
Now, I understood perfectly that people could be able to communicate if they were non-speaking,
Mhm.
but I had this idea of this reciprocity that happened and eye contact. I had been told my whole life, and it like beaten into me that if you don't make eye contact, then you're a liar,
Oh.
right? So it was one of two things. You're either a liar or you're you have a developmental disorder, right? That makes it impossible for you to do that. So that couldn't possibly be something for me. I had worked on and I was able to have eye contact, whether I liked it or not. Um, so I didn't see until
Yes.
I did.
Right. I remember that day very distinctly. So,
Right.
okay, I feel like we've jumped over a couple of things that are important to your story. There's a couple girlfriends in there,
Oh,
a
yeah. I
marriage,
mean,
a child.
yeah.
Uh, so before you, because the autism thing was recent, because I was around for that. So let's go back 15 years, 20 years, I guess, because your
Are
kiddo
you
is
going to
like,
bring up the time that I was harassed by Fred Phelps? You know, because I lived in Topeka, Kansas, and Fred Phelps and
I
the
don't know
Westboro
who Fred
Baptist
Phelps.
Church is
Oh,
there in, yes, the Westboro
yes,
Baptist
yes.
Church
Okay.
is
I
there
was
in
like,
Kansas.
oh,
And
okay.
yes, I was harassed on several occasions by them for
Yes.
kissing my girlfriend.
Yes. Yes. I was not going there, but that's a good story. So we will touch on that point. Um, I was just making sure, like, there's milestones there of like, um, before your current partner, you l- that sounded weird. It was in my head, but it sounded weird. You lived life in a good way. I mean, in a good way. And see, I can't get this to come out in any way that doesn't sound weird. Uh,
So
I
I
just
live
made
life in a
yes,
very good way now with my current partner.
yes,
I lived my life in a good way prior to my first marriage.
yes.
But
That's what I'm
in
trying to get.
between that good life and this good life, there was some serious
Shit.
difficulty. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. But my first true love, the first person who I fell head over heels in love with, um, was a female when I was 11. And she was my very best friend, um, other than my cousin. And in fact, the three of us did lots of stuff together um, for many, 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 many years um, until the conversation really came to light when my cousin brought it up to her one day and said, "Are you stupid? She's been in love with you for 20 years."
Oh no.
And unfortunately, that seemed to start the process of unraveling the friendship.
Is this Jessica Rabbit?
This is not Jessica Rabbit, no.
Oh, okay. All right. I was like, wait, Jessica Rabbit?
This is not Jessica
Anyway.
Rabbit, no.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean like that was the analogy you used, and then that's all
Yes.
I could go with. Um, okay. So you also moved internationally. You got to experience life outside the US, which I'm sure was extremely eye-opening, especially with where you went. Um, and I kind of want to touch on that, and then we'll head back towards the autism self-awareness.
Yes. So when my son was 2.5, I met his dad, right? Obviously not biological gene donor, but his dad, the person who raised him, um, along with me. Um, and and it was good. We had a lot in common. Um, we had a lot of arguments about who was smarter. Um, different things like that. And it was good while it was good.
Yeah.
And then when it wasn't good anymore, it wasn't good anymore. And I understand the difficulty that he had with me. I understand that a lot of that was my ability or inability to have a healthy relationship while also being very good at my job and trying to maintain both. I really struggle with both.
I mean, it's
Um,
hard.
yeah, like I really struggle. I can put my energy into work or I can put my energy into home.
Mm.
And so for the longest time, I put all of my energy into work and none of my energy into home. And any energy that I did have for home was saved for my son. Um, and both of us having difficulty with communication, right? Me with being, and he was absolutely right. He's like, "You're a roller coaster." And absolutely, there's no doubt about that because now I understand that my sensory environment plays heavily on my emotions and my ability to even partake in conversation. And my go-to reaction is anger.
Mm.
So it's yelling, it's being disgusted. Um, and definitely, like at home, I don't do anything about my facial expressions, but I have a lot of sensory issues. And so for our entire marriage, anytime he would eat, I was disgusted. And I would say, "That's disgusting," you know? And whereas he would want to sit down at the table and have a quiet dinner with no sound because he didn't like a lot of sound, he liked a very, very, very calm, quiet environment. Whereas I like loud colors, music, that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
definitely if somebody's eating, I need there to be a lot of noise in the background so that I'm not focused on that. And so that was an issue. Um, I mean, a lot of little things like that, but those little things build up. You know, the fact that he was a gentle toucher
Oh.
and I'm not a gentle toucher. So Like I'm somebody who really, really responds well to 5 minutes of a back rub. Um, like can do wonders for me, but it has to be like dig your elbow into my back, like I'm up against like the cabinets with the knobs on them, like pushing as hard as I can into the corner, trying to, get that deep pressure in there. So for all that time, I didn't have that in my partner
Mm.
because they weren't able to do that, or they weren't able to understand that. And then the more it came out as with me talking about, this is what I need. And for us to have, a satisfactory sex life, this is what I need. It was intimidating. I had always been more sexually, open, and actually he was very open, but not as experienced, and therefore
Mhm.
there was that. I mean, in his words, it was, you are intimidating. You are a very intimidating person all the way around. He's like,
You
you're
kind of are. I mean, you're
and he was a gentle, nice person, like
yeah.
I'm just going to go about my business quietly through the world, and I can go all day without talking, and that sort of thing. And eventually we weren't able to move past that.
And I think that's a struggle that a lot of dual neurodivergent couples struggle with, because not all, obviously, but for a lot of us, it's like, this is what I need and nothing else. And this is what I need and nothing else. And it's kind of hard to make them go other sides. Like it's a lot of conversations, which makes total sense why you so enjoy those conversations now.
Right. But I would try to have those conversations, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so one of the things that he said one of the things that he said to me is, he said, you take everything
Mm.
and you put it in a box and you wrap it up with a bow, and you know exactly the right box to put it in, and it has to be just right. He says that's what you do with everything, and you have to understand everything all the time. It's infuriating. It drives me insane. And I'm like, okay, but you're that way with airplanes,
Right.
to the point that you're an avionics engineer. Like, like that's what I do with people. That's what you do with airplanes.
Right. Oh my gosh.
But that's difficult. Like, right? If like I don't
Yeah.
give a shit about your airplanes. I don't want to hear about your airplanes. I don't care. Whatever. Cool. You identified the 5 airplanes that just went by. Cool. Yay. Good for you. Um, you know, uh, but I don't want to hear about the little to me insignificant stuff, and you don't want to hear about me talking about the human psyche and how the nervous system gets dysregulated and the things that we can do to regulate our nervous system.
I'm laughing because I sent Steven, or my partner, a TikTok yesterday, and it was uh a a gay couple. The one partner is Darcy, and he has ADHD, and so his partner recorded a conversation where the partner just started going on a tangent about shopping for apples at the grocery store, and like how there wasn't, I wanted to get Fuji or Gala apples, but they didn't have any. So then I was starting to look at the Granny Smiths and the, Red Delicious, and like goes on, and eventually Darcy turns around and goes, "What the fuck are you doing? I don't give a shit about apples." And like walked away. And so I sent it to my partner because I was like, does this feel familiar? And nods were sent back. Yes, yes, that
Yeah.
does. I'm the person talking about apples in that scenario, FYI. Um, but so that's why I was laughing, because that's literally like the same thing, and that's something we experience as a couple ourselves. We don't have much time left, so I do want to hop into like the pivotal moment when you realize this is not just ADHD, that there, like, I'm sure you always had, like, there's other things at play, but when did you first go, I'm autistic?
This would be after, the military move and coming to where we are right now and it being such a loud, difficult environment for me.
Mhm.
Um, Basically, everything about the environment is disabling for me. And that's something that I had not experienced as much before. Although I do recognize when I had my move prior, I had some of the same issues with the noise and being somewhere that was, Kansas versus Montreal. Like,
Right.
you're used to being in a quieter space and you like being out and being able to look up at the sky and not having any light pollution and that sort of thing. Growing up in the country, like, all of that is very different from then being in the city and having all of the noise and the smells, right? Like, it's just, there's so many sensory things. So when that happened, um couple years ago, and you and I were talking, I was like, I can't anymore. I have got to see a psychiatrist. I have got to do something. I can't do this without medication anymore. I need some support. So, and I had been taking medication. So since I had cancer, I had some nerve issues, and I was taking a medication that numbed that. And eventually, I decided that I wanted to come off of that medication. I had been on it for 10 years. I didn't want to take it anymore. I wanted to see if I could come off of it. It was very, very, very difficult to come off of. Um, but I was able to regulate and deal with the pain um, through nervous system management, and also able to recognize that that pain is a signifier that I'm overstimulated or getting close to, if I keep this going, a burnout is going to happen,
Right.
that sort of thing. So I kind of embraced that and I liked that. So when I stopped that medication, not only did it stop numbing that pain, it stopped numbing the other stuff. So I recognize now that there was a lot of sensory stuff that it numbed.
Oh.
Um, I can very easily recognize that now looking at before the medication, during the medication, after the medication. It's like, wow, that did that for me, right? It works on your nerves. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, that since the sensory system is part of the nervous system and all of that.
Mhm.
So I had to go and try to get some medication, and I wanted something that wasn't going to numb me, that wasn't going to. Uh oh. I have no idea what just happened.
Neither do I, but you're back. Okay. So
But
you
we're
wanted,
back. Okay.
we're back.
You disappeared on my side, but I bet I disappeared on your side,
Yes,
right?
of course.
Of course. Okay.
So you had something that you wanted something that didn't numb you, that helped with the nervous system dysregulation.
Right.
That's where
I
we left off.
wanted I wanted to be able to regulate my emotions. That was really important to me. Because I don't like the anger and that, and I wanted to be able to address, I wanted to be able to respond instead of react. Um, and at around this time, when I went back, and so we started talking about sensory, and she was like, what I really think is happening here is that you've got some sensory processing stuff going on. And then it was like all of the years of education went click, 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 click. And it
Oh.
was what, the day after my appointment, where she's like, I think there's some sensory processing stuff. We're going to give you this medication to help with that. And let's see. And then I came to you and I was like, do you think I'm autistic?
Yeah, you sent me a message and you were like, I need to talk to you. I have a question. And it was very serious. And there was like this demeanor. I was like, oh my God, like, is she quitting? Is she like, I don't know, what the heck? You joining a band? I don't know. Anyway, and yeah, and then you were like, you just sat there and you stared at me. Am I autistic? And I was like, yes. Which
Yeah.
I and I try not to disclose to other people that I think they're autistic unless they ask me a question outright. So then I was like, yes, I do. And here's
Yeah.
why. Here's all the things that I've seen. And then you were like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just, that realization and understanding that I hid inside my ADHD for many, 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 many years.
Right.
Allowing the ADHD and asking the ADHD to help me survive,
Right.
which it did until it didn't any longer,
It was tired.
which often happens when we get to that age, right? Like I was 40
Right.
and I had really big changes in my behavior. Anytime I had major hormone shifts anyway, like when I was pregnant, when I, went through puberty, when I had cancer. Like during these times, it's really easy now looking back to say, oh, if we would have known.
Right.
So, of course, my goal now is my whole goal in life, along with, being a sexologist and helping people understand the intersections of sexuality and neurodiversity and all of the other intersections that we have along with them and how that plays into our nervous system and our overall happiness and fulfillment in life, and to our abilities and disabilities. I want all of the research to stop in the way that it's being done, which is 5 years of research with no action. And I want us to listen to the community and say, here's something that needs to happen. Here's how testing needs to change. Here's how, workplace management needs to change. Here's how um, therapy needs to change. Here's how behavioral therapy needs to change. Like, and make the change now, and then do community-based participatory research in that, where we're making changes and then we're making changes and we're making changes and we're going through this loop of change, evaluate, change some more, evaluate, and it's all community led with people who have life experience as well as professional experience coming together to so our kids don't have to experience, our grandkids, because my kid is an adult, don't have to experience what we did.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm glad for the experience. I'm glad it happened the way that it did. I have all the gratitude, for that and for having my diagnosis now. I would not be who I am now had I had a diagnosis when I was 5.
Right.
Right? There's no doubt about that. So I am grateful for that. But now let's change. Let's make some changes.
Agreed. All right. Any last words on your story before we sign off for today? There's a lot to
Um,
pack, and it's hard to pack your whole story in 45 minutes. There's just so much. So
right,
if
and
any
that was like that was the chapter sections, not even the chapters, right?
right. Yes. I I will say this. If we've hinted on anything today and you're like, Angela, to tell me more about this one thing, please message us or comment below or wherever you are, contact us.
Yeah,
And we can dig into these things more. But what were you going
absolutely.
to say? I'm sorry.
Absolutely. I was just going to say, my story is my story alone. And there may be similarities to some people's stories. There may be differences to some people's stories. So as you're listening, keep your mind open either way. Self-diagnosis is perfectly valid. but don't base your diagnosis off of, well, this was her experience and she's autistic, therefore I must be as well. There's lots of information out there for you to go through your own process of learning about yourself. And it doesn't mean that you have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars um, at, uh, at a therapist's office um, getting that diagnosis. We understand that not everybody has the opportunities to make that happen.
Yes. All right. Well, then I think that it's time for our outro. And we will see you all next week.
All right. Thanks for listening to Drudgery, Dreams, and In Between, a weekly live podcast coming to you every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Pacific. If you're catching this live on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel for updates when we're back here next week. For all you podcast geeks, subscribe on your fave podcast app. We're on them all. If you'd like to support the podcast, be sure to leave a rating and review and share with your friends. To catch all the latest from us, visit us at drudgeryanddreams.com and follow on your favorite social media platforms at Drudgery and Dreams. Thanks again. See you next time.